customary at readings like this to say that it's an honor to be among the people chosen to read, but after hearing all these excellent, really outstanding pieces, well, it truly is an honor for me, so thank you very much. 8 months and 8 days into my widowhood, the great god insomnia rattled me awake, and so I reached for a book. Of all those stacked on my bedside table, only The Spiral Staircase by Karen Armstrong had come from a library. I like to buy my own books. My husband, Bill, had been an ardent bibliophile. Some years, his lists of what he had read cataloged more than a book a day. Such a passionate reader needed a library nearby, so once, twice a week, he'd sail off to our local branch. When his final, fatal diagnosis came, what he railed against was not his cancer, but how his weakened condition had reduced his concentration to the point where he couldn't read. Deprived of reading, he couldn't recognize his own mind. Then, thanks to chemotherapy, he rallied, and we'd sail off to the library, oxygen tank in tow. All summer and fall, he sat on our patio, a cup of coffee at his elbow and a book before him. When winter came and then early spring, chemo proved less effective, and the respite and joy of reading ever more critical. The last title in his journal is The Holy War by Gregory Pegg. The date is April 6, 2008. 1 month and 1 day later, Bill was dead. And so, bowing to the great god insomnia, I opened Armstrong's Spiral Staircase. A former nun, Armstrong had tried and failed to find her niche, but neither academia nor a career in television was a fitting home for her questing spirit. Remaining on the periphery of life, she observed it, feeling herself to be, as we in bereavement groups say of ourselves, adrift. We widows know well what Armstrong refers to as her sense of isolation from what others call life. That sense, we know that sense of bifurcation. Our internal broken-hearted lives, our real lives, are always more vivid than whatever the rest of the world sees us doing. Going to cookouts, having our tires rotated, we seem like real people, but those are only our outer husks. For instance, the day I got Armstrong's book, I must have handed my card to the librarian. Maybe I even thanked her, but I don't know. I wasn't there, you see. My real me was seeing Bill months earlier. There he was, slumped in a chair by the library's window, too weak to search the shelves himself. My real me was hearing him say, each time I brought him a new release for approval, "Nothing too thick, Pat. I can't hold it." And so I read on toward where Armstrong, her careers in television and writing seemingly ended, resolves to write a book about God. Liking herself to a knight questing for the Holy Grail, she embarks into an unknown landscape, her only certainty that the paths that had ended in success for others had ended in disaster for herself. And then on page 271, I discovered a message penciled on an ordinary Post-it note from Anonymous, a miracle really. On that commonplace little square, Anonymous had written 3 words, "This is true." And so there could be no mistake, he'd drawn an arrow pointing like the finger of God to Armstrong's words. In the past, my own practice of religion had diminished me, whereas true faith, I now believe, should make you more human than before. What an act of faith on the part of Anonymous, that having no certainty and only thin hope anyone would read his note, he had posted it anyway. Of all God's creatures, we humans alone are endowed with this singular ability to read and write. On papyrus, on paper, on post-it notes. We make hatch marks, little more than lines and loops, really, to execute a private transaction between two minds and obliterate the barriers of time and distance. And so we connect to one another and to what's most human in ourselves. I'd like to say that reading the message from Anonymous transformed and inspired me to write off and slay the great god insomnia. But life is not fiction. The work of widowhood is more akin to Armstrong's own struggles when she wrote about God and so knitted together her inner and outer selves. Finding your authentic self when you become a widow is not easy. But in every marriage, someone will be left to do it. Their only hope will be to grope their way forward, finding guideposts wherever they can. My guideposts are books stacked on my bedside table, the memory of a good man's love, and the bravery of people like Anonymous who leave breadcrumbs sparkling like diamonds. I have no certainty my severed selves will ever reconnect, or that one day I will emerge as a new, authentic me. But if I am to live, my only way is forward. This I believe, this is true. Anonymous told me so.